When you play the Game of Thrones,
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
All right, hello YouTube. Welcome back to the Grease Comics YouTube channel. In today's video, we are going to be talking about Stannis and why he declares for R'hllor in Book 2, A Clash of Kings. Now, this is a topic that I talked about quite a lot in my chapter reread video on Tuesday, so if you do end up liking this video, I check that video out as I do go into it in more detail. But that chapter really inspired me to do a video on this because was it a mistake for Stannis to actually take the Red God and not the New Gods? Now, we do know that Stannis is not really a big believer in the gods in general. One of the things we learned in Davos 1, A Clash of Kings is that after his mother and father died, Stannis really had no belief in any gods. He is basically atheist, right? He doesn't really believe in any of the gods at all. And so when you come around and he gets R'hllor, it's quite interesting because you got to remember, the only people that really are even preaching about R'hllor is like Thoros. He's the closest that Westeros has to any type of influence by the Red God in Westeros. So you're bringing over a foreign religion. And also the other part about Thoros, right? He didn't really even believe in the Red God or R'hllor. That was something that came later with Beric Dondarrion in the normal story. So Melisandre is really our first true priestess coming over, spreading R'hllor and getting to a major house in the Baratheons, or the Least specifically, and then I guess to Stannis as well. So the question I have, and to pose to you guys, because it's the same thing that Davos brings up in his first chapter, is was it a good idea? Because like Davos says and tells Stannis, it's going to very much alienate your supporters, future alliances, and that's something we even see with later on as Tyrion uses the faith against Stannis, right? Preaching that Stannis is going to bring the Red God, he's going to destroy Baelor's sept. Again, we see that already in Dragonstone, the sept that the Targaryens had made on Dragonstone was destroyed. It was looted or destroyed. All of the gods' statues are burned. That is something that Tyrion is going to use against Stannis. And when you have Westeros, which is a very dominated society by the New Gods, most of the country believes in the New Gods outside of, a few houses in the south, like for instance, the Blackwoods, but mainly it's just the north that believes in the old gods. And so when you come to this point where you look at Stannis, he is really going to kind of screw up his potential prospects with other houses. Because when you think about it right away, the Reach is probably the house that is the closest to the gods and their influence in the entirety of Westeros. I feel like the Dornish wouldn't care as much. I think they'd be one of the houses that would be kind of the least offended by going with the new gods. But when you think about all the rest of these houses, think about the squabbles that occurred just in Davos 1, with all the lords kind of disagreeing. Davos himself, who isn't like a proud believer of the new gods, but he still does think of them as the gods that he does worship from here and there for things like, for instance, his wife birthing a child and praying to the mother, or praying to any of the other gods for certain other things, like, when he sets sail or going into a battle or whatever. If you can take that, somebody like Davos, who doesn't particularly care about religion all that much, but even he is kind of disturbed by what Stannis is doing, take that to a lot of these other houses that have a deep connection to the faith and to, the Seven. If you think about even later on, right, if you think about the High Sparrow and that movement, and it shows how powerful religion can be, because in my opinion, it's weird the religion in Westeros, especially the faith and the new gods, is they kind of start out like during Aegon's conquest time at a very powerful level, and then slowly they just kind of decline. But then once the dragons are gone, their influence goes back up again. When you have people like Baelor the Blessed specifically, and a lot of the Targaryens going forward are very close to the faith. I think people like Aemon the Dragon Knight and his sister Nerys, they were very pious. And so you have the religion kind of back on an upswing to where they have a lot of influence and power. And so when you attribute that to Stannis, and again, even think about something else that Cersei does, right? Cersei kind of uses Stannis' religion to try and recruit this High Sparrow and use the faith militant against Stannis. So it's interesting all of the repercussions that occur because of Stannis' decision, but when you go to then the flip side of it, right? What is Stannis going to do? So I want to actually bring up this quote because I provided kind of Davos' side of it, and I kind of want to provide Stannis' rationale. So I'm going to read off what he tells Davos in Davos 1, A Clash of Kings. Stannis stood abruptly. R'hllor, why is that so hard? They will not love me, you say. When have they ever loved me? How can I lose something that I have never owned? He moved to the south window to gaze out at the moonlit sea. I stopped believing in gods the day I saw the wind proud break up across the bay. Any god so monstrous as to drown my mother and father would never have my worship, I vowed. In King's Landing, the High Septon would prattle at me of how all justice and goodness flowed from the Seven, but all I ever saw of either was made by men. If you do not believe in gods, why trouble with this new one? Stannis broke in. I have asked myself as well. I know little and care less of gods, but the Red Priestess has power. Yes, but what sort of power? Cresson had wisdom. I trusted in his wisdom and your wiles, and what did they avail me, smuggler? The Storm Lord sent you packing, and I went to them a beggar, and they laughed at me. Well, there will be no more begging and no more laughing either. The Iron Throne is mine by rights, but how am I to take it? There are 4 kings in the realm, and 3 of them have more men and more gold than I do. I have ships, and I have her, the Red Woman. Half my knights are afraid even to say her name, did you know? If she can do nothing else, a sorceress who can inspire such dread in grown men is not to be despised. A frightened man is a beaten man, and perhaps she can do more. I mean to find out. And that's the key point, right? What Stannis is talking about at the end of it is, what does it matter, right? Even if he declared for the 7 and the new gods, nobody else was going to come to his aid, right? Like we talked about, Davos went to the heart of where Stannis' support should have been, the Stormlands. None of them back him. They all back Renly. Well, okay, where else can he go? All these allies that he potentially could have, the North, well, the Starks, they are independent following Robb. So are the Tullys, the Aarons, nobody's heard of. And honestly, if the Aarons get in the war, it's likely going to be on Robb's side. The Lannisters, obviously, you're not going to gain any support there. And like I already talked about, the Stormlands are with Renly, and so is the Reach. So the only house really unaccounted for are the Dornish. So you sit here and you go, yeah, Stannis is kind of right. What's the point? It's not going to make other people love him more. And so he tries to rule with kind of fear. He kind of goes the Tywin route here. Stannis and Tywin do have a couple parallels here. And so instead of basically surrendering and basically being a beggar, he's choosing to play the wild card. Mel, this power he doesn't truly understand, but he knows she has some sort of power. And so he chooses to use that. And you think about the actions going forward, how else was Stannis going to get to the Iron Throne? Right? How else if not with Mel? If it's not for Mel, Renly would still be alive. Courtney Penrose would be somebody that also would still be alive. Mel helped slay him as well. And so there would be no chance for Stannis to gain any type of support or to even try to gain the Iron Throne if he didn't have A, parts of Renly's army, and having the proof that he needs to disprove that the Lannisters are basically putting Joffrey, who is a bastard and born of incest, on the throne. So for all of Stannis' goals to be met, something has to happen. And it seems likely the only way that was going to occur was through Mel. Now, maybe you could make the argument a faceless man. Again, Stannis doesn't have the gold for that, and also that'd be very costly given that Renly's a king. Again, you're kind of backed into a corner. It's Stannis being tired of trying to play the normal game, right? Trying to, get these people to come to him, but that's not going to work. They don't love him like they love maybe Robb Stark or Renly or Joffrey or whoever. It's Stannis being backed into a corner. And so, yes, you can criticize Stannis for, going with R'hllor and the Red God because of the implications it has later on in the story. Even if you think about, later, right? When we get to the North, there's a lot of tensions between the clans in the North that Stannis, recruits, the Northern men that he's marching with to Winterfell, and the Southern men, the Queen's men. There's a lot of hostilities between the two. And a lot of Northern houses would probably view Stannis as even more of an outsider. Yes, he's from the South, but he's also bringing this foreign god that, again, a lot of things like the Boltons can spread is, oh yeah, they're going to burn your trees that you love or you believe in or whatever, right? That Stannis is going to strike down the old gods. That is something that would have motivated a lot of houses maybe against him. If it was coming from maybe anybody else besides the Boltons, people would definitely not back Stannis. But the thing in the North is, Stannis is kind of just the preferred candidate because they don't hate Stannis as much as they do Roose. That's kind of would be the logic for somebody like Wyman Manderly specifically. And so you come to the end of the video, and the thing is, right, if you're getting to where Stannis wants to be, he wants to attain his goal of sitting on the Iron Throne because it's his right or he's doing his duty and all those things, the only really way that he could have done that was through Mel. unless you're going to change Stannis' character completely. And that's the other thing George doesn't do, right? George builds Stannis' character that doesn't, negotiate well. He's not somebody that compromises, a ton, right? Especially to like another king, right? So Stannis is somebody that is very flawed. And that's what kind of leads him to his only option being Mel. But even if you want to take a step back, right? If Stannis was to work with Renly, the only way that could have possibly happened was if Renly would have took his crown away, right? Stannis makes a pretty good offer, right? He says, okay, Renly, you will be, my heir unless there's another son born to me, right? That's a pretty good offer because Stannis likely wasn't going to have any more children anyway. So Renly would have become king regardless, and neither one of the brothers would have had to fight each other. But that's not who Renly is, right? Renly saw that he could win the throne by conquest, and so he wasn't able to do that. And if you want to say, oh, okay, he goes with Robb, that one to me is a little bit more acceptable. It's just the problem is at this time, if you're Robb, there's not really a reason to ally with Stannis. Stannis doesn't have that many men for you to, like, again, you're going to have to put your crown away. You're not going to have to be, you can't be king of the North anymore. You're going to have to go against all these people that just named you king of the North because they want to be isolated from the rest of Westeros. You'd have to do that for Stannis, who has, barely 4,000 or 5,000 men at this time, maybe. It just doesn't make any sense. And that's the problem, is that Stannis is in such a bad position just based upon the fact that he doesn't have the support of Westeros whatsoever. And so it really comes down to Stannis had one option, and so he went with it. And, he's going to have to live to regret the decisions he may have made. He reflects a lot on Renly's death. And, he basically was involved in killing his brother. There's a lot of that, right? And you got to even think that he almost considered, and you also have to think about him considering to kill Edric Storm as well, somebody he was also related to for, in his eyes, the greater good. So yeah, I think it's a very fascinating topic, and I just think that Davos 1, A Clash of Kings, really invigorated me to make this video because I just think it's such a fascinating topic. But let me know what you guys think, and again, I would highly recommend, if you liked this video, to check out the reread on Tuesday. It's a really long chapter. It's a pretty long chapter, pretty long video, so give it a watch if you liked this video, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye, guys.